So the last thing we need to make as far as the templates are concerned is a brick tile mould. So we're going to use these brick tiles. So these are ones that I've made earlier. We're going to use these brick tiles in order to decorate the actual dome of the pizza oven. So this is surprisingly easy to make. So although this is a 6 tile mould, I'm going to show you how to make a 9 tile mould, because in hindsight I should have really made a 9 mould instead of a 6, because obviously the more compartments you've got, the more brick tiles you can make at any one time. So the first thing you're going to need to source is a piece of plastic or perspex. So I had a large piece of perspex lying in the garden, which was used in the past as a temporary repair for a piece of greenhouse glass that was smashed. Don't panic though if you can't find anything like perspex or plastic big enough to make the actual mould itself, because while you're in IKEA buying the flexible chopping boards, IKEA also do these type of trays, plastic trays. These are about £1.50, I think about $1.80 equivalent, and you can use the back side of one of these to do exactly the same thing. So what we also need is we need some old bricks. It depends what look you're going for, but with the pizza oven that I've done, I wanted like an old style brick appearance. So I found some old bricks, and all I've done is I've used a disc cutter to actually cut the ends off the bricks. So about a 5 or 6 mil piece. Just be careful obviously when you're doing that. So I've just sliced the end off the brick on both ends, and I've gone for bricks which have got quite a bit of character to them as well. So for a 9 compartment mould, you'll need 5 of these bricks, obviously, to get your 9 pieces. So once you've got those, just clean them up, give them a wipe on the back, make sure there's no dust on them. So once we've made sure that everything's nice and clean, the next thing we need to do is we need to take some blue tack. So we take a piece of blue tack, and what we want to do is to actually roll this out into almost like a very thin, long piece of string. If you're going to roll it on a worktop, make sure that the worktop is nice and clean, because otherwise the blue tack will pick up the dust off the worktop and it'll become less tacky. So once you've done that and you've got the blue tack nice and thin, the next thing we want to do is to go around the very outside edge underneath the piece of brick that you've actually cut. Just go around the outside edge with the blue tack, just pressing it down. If the blue tack is too thick, that means that this profile, because this will sit onto the plastic, that profile will be too thick, so your brick slips will end up quite heavy. So make sure this is as thin as you can get it. So what you'll end up with is just a very thin, almost like a rope of blue tack around the outside edge underneath. Okay, so the blue tack does 2 things. One is it will fasten the piece of brick in place so that when we pour the silicone into the mould, it's not going to move about. But more importantly, it prevents any silicone from seeping underneath here, which we don't want to do. So once we've got that in place, the next thing we want to do is position the piece of brick on our piece of plastic. And if you're using something like this, a tray, just bear in mind that you're going to be putting a wooden border around the outside edge, and we want ideally at least a centimetre gap between the brick and the piece of wood itself. So if you take the wood that you're going to use and just use that as a guide, and then everything, so from the top, the next piece of brick and also obviously the outside edge there, we want to ideally have a centimetre in between, because that will make a very strong silicone mould. So once we're happy with the position, all we need to do then is just firmly press down around the outside edge, just to make sure that this slip, the blue tack actually sticks to the plastic. And when we're happy with that, we'll move on to the next one. If you press down and you get any blue tack coming around the outside edge, get a Stanley knife and just trim that off. That wants to be as neat as possible, because silicone will replicate any mark at all that it comes into contact with. So all of these, you might not be able to see it on the camera, but there's a lot of indentations and stuff. Silicone will go into there and that will be reproduced in the mould, but it will also reproduce any of the blue tack which has managed to find its way around outside of the edge. So once you have all of the brick slips positioned and all pressed down onto the blue tack and all fastened into place, of course I'm just using this as an example because I've already done the mould, I'm not going to do another one. You then need to put a wooden border around the outside edge, again just using these pieces as examples, that you get a centimetre gap all the way around the outside. So you measure the 4 pieces, and then from the underneath just some pilot holes and just screw in from the underneath. So I'm just going to use this existing mould as an example. So what you'll end up with is you'll actually end up with 9 brick pieces, whereas obviously I've got 6 here, and they will all be pressed down into place with the blue tack running underneath. The next thing you need to do once you've put your wooden frame in is to take some more blue tack, roll it out in exactly the same way so it's nice and thin, and then run it around the inside edge all the way around the bottom where the plastic or perspex meets the wood on the inside, and also up the sides as well. Make sure that is all sealed in, because if it's not and you've got any spaces at all where silicone can leak out, it could potentially leak almost all of the silicone out, and it would be a completely wasted exercise and an expensive exercise. So make sure you take some time to do that. Press it all in. There's no leaks whatsoever once the silicone goes in. So the first video in this series explains exactly which silicone you're going to need and how much. I'm not going to go through that again, but what you need to do is, before you're going to mix the silicone as per the manufacturer's instructions, and before you actually pour the silicone into the mould, take a release agent. So I've just used GT85, any kind of oil will do. This is just cheap from Aldi's at £1.99, and just spray. Make sure you get all around the edge and obviously over the brick pieces as well. Not too much, don't go mad, just give it a nice light spray over the top, and then when you pour your silicone in and it cures, it'll be a lot easier to actually demold. So after you've poured your silicone in and you've left it to cure, probably overnight, so about 24 hours to cure, to make sure it's fully cured, you'll be faced with something like this. So the way to actually demold is to take the screws out from underneath that you've placed in, and then you'll find it quite easy to just manipulate these pieces of wood and they will actually come off. And then once they're off, it's just a case of just very gently easing back and just peeling this silicone mold off. Once you've got the silicone mould out, and obviously you've taken the bricks pieces out, you can then push it back in again. And that's it, you're ready to go. You can start to actually cast your brick tiles. Obviously the brick pieces that you've actually cut, they don't go to waste, because you can actually mix these in with the tiles that you manufacture, and it just gives it a more realistic look as well.